Rich man abandons twin brother. 20 years later, he needs a kidney and discovers his brother now owns all major hospitals in the state. Victor Ashford sat in his opulent office, a world of glass and steel perched high above the bustling streets of New York City. The sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden hue over the mahogany desk cluttered with awards and accolades that he had accumulated over the years. Each trophy, each framed certificate, stood as a testament to his relentless ambition and dedication to the healthcare industry. Yet, despite the glimmering success surrounding him, there was a darkness lurking just beneath the surface, a nagging pain that had begun to intrude upon his meticulously curated life. He shifted in his leather chair, trying to find a comfortable position, but the sharp, stabbing sensation in his side made it impossible. Victor grimaced, his fingers instinctively pressing against the area, as if he could will the pain away. His mind raced, not with thoughts of the patients he had helped or the innovations he had spearheaded, but rather with a haunting realization: he was alone. The accolades, the wealth, and the power, none of it filled the void that loneliness had carved into his life. As he stared out at the sprawling city below, he couldn't help but feel that he had sacrificed too much at the altar of success. "Dad," a soft voice called from the doorway, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. It was Clara, his only daughter, a bright spark of light amid the shadows of his life. She stood there, her brow furrowed in concern as she took in the sight of her father. "Hey, sweetheart," he managed to say, forcing a smile that felt brittle and unconvincing. "What brings you here?" Clara stepped into the room, her eyes darting to the array of awards on the wall before landing on Victor. "I wanted to see how you're feeling. I know you've been busy lately." She hesitated, then added, "You've been looking a little unwell." Victor waved a hand dismissively, attempting to brush off her concern. "Just a long week, Clara. You know how it is." He leaned back in his chair, hoping to project an air of nonchalance, but Clara wasn't convinced. She had always been perceptive, able to read the subtle shifts in his mood, the unspoken words that lingered between them. "Dad, please. You can't keep ignoring this. I know you're not just tired," she pressed, stepping closer. "You look pale. Are you sure everything is okay?" He felt the warmth of irritation rising within him. "I'm fine, Clara. Really. Just a little stress, that's all." But even as he spoke, he could feel the lie hanging heavy in the air. The truth was that his health had been deteriorating, and he had been too proud to admit it. No, it wasn't just pride, it was fear. Fear of what it meant to acknowledge his own vulnerability, fear of what it would mean to rely on others. Clara's gaze softened, and she reached out to touch his arm gently. "You can talk to me, you know. I'm here for you. Isn't that what family is for?" Victor pulled his arm away, a reflexive action born from years of building walls around himself. "I appreciate it, Clara, but I'm really fine." He forced the words out, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "I just have a lot on my plate right now. The company needs me." "Dad, you're not a machine. You can't just work yourself to the bone." "I'm worried about you," Clara insisted, her voice rising slightly with frustration. "You need to take care of yourself first. What if you need medical attention? What if enough?" Victor snapped, the word echoing in the grand office. The sharpness of his tone surprised even him, and he watched as Clara flinched, stepping back slightly. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to soften his expression. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to raise my voice. It's complicated. Please, let's not talk about this right now." Clara crossed her arms, her brows knitting together in concern. "But it is important, Dad. You can't keep pushing this away. If something is really wrong, I want you to tell me. You can't just keep pretending everything is fine." Victor's heart sank. He knew she was right, but the thought of opening up about his health made him feel exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't been in years. I'll be fine, Clara. I promise. Just focus on your own life, okay? You have your own responsibilities. I don't want to burden you with my problems. Burden? Dad, I'm your daughter. It's not a burden to care about you, Clara said, her voice low but intense. I want you to be honest with me. You don't have to face this alone. He sighed, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a lead blanket. I don't want you to worry. I've built this life, this empire, and I want you to be proud of me. I don't want to be a source of concern. Clara's expression softened, her arms relaxing. I am proud of you, Dad. But I'm also scared. I don't want to lose you. You can't keep pushing me away. For a moment, the air between them felt heavy with unspoken truths. Victor looked away, his gaze drifting to the window as he considered the life he had built. The city pulsed with energy, but all he could feel was the ache in his side, a reminder that life was fragile and fleeting. I know, he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to ask for help. As if sensing the shift in the mood, Clara stepped closer again, her voice gentle. You don't have to ask for help. Just let me in. Let's face this together. Victor met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw the depth of her concern, the love and determination shining through her eyes. It was a glimpse of the connection he had been neglecting, and it struck him that perhaps, just perhaps, he could allow a sliver of vulnerability to seep through the cracks of his carefully constructed facade. Okay, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I'll try. But there's something I need to tell you. He hesitated, the weight of his secret pressing down on him. I've been feeling unwell. I might need a transplant. A kidney transplant. Clara's eyes widened in shock, and the color drained from her face. A kidney transplant? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Dad, that's serious. I didn't want to worry you, he replied, a deep sense of regret washing over him. I didn't want to burden you with this. Burden? This is your health we're talking about. Who can be a donor? Clara asked, her voice rising with concern. Victor hesitated, the name lingering on the tip of his tongue, a name he had tried to bury beneath years of guilt and regret. I don't know yet. I haven't thought that far ahead. Clara's brow furrowed as she studied his face, searching for answers. But you have to think about it, Dad. We need to find someone. You can't just wait around. I'll figure it out, Victor insisted, the familiar edge creeping back into his voice. I have everything under control. Do you? Clara challenged, her eyes fierce. Because it doesn't look that way from where I'm standing. You need to confront this head-on, and that means reaching out to the people you've hurt. Victor felt the heat rise in his cheeks, the familiar sense of defensiveness taking hold. What are you suggesting? That I reach out to Ethan? Maybe it's time, Clara replied softly, her voice steady. Maybe it's time for you to face the past and mend what's broken. Victor's heart sank at the mention of his brother's name. Ethan, the brother he had abandoned, the one he had left behind in the wake of his own ambition. The thought of reaching out to him sent a wave of discomfort through him, a reminder of the pain he had caused and the choices he had made. I can't, he said, the words bitter on his tongue. I can't just reach out to him after all this time. It's complicated. Life is complicated, Dad. But you can't let that stop you from doing what's right, Clara urged, her voice unwavering. You need to put aside your pride and ask for help. You need to make amends. Victor felt trapped in a storm of emotions: fear, resentment, regret. I can't just fix everything with a phone call, he protested weakly, but deep down, he knew that Clara was right. The path to healing wouldn't be easy, but it was certainly necessary. Maybe not, Clara conceded. But you have to start somewhere. You owe it to yourself and to Ethan. You owe it to the both of you. Victor looked into Clara's eyes, seeing not just worry but also the fierce determination to guide him toward healing. He felt a flicker of hope, the possibility that perhaps he could find a way to reconcile with his past and, in doing so, save his own future. In the bustling heart of New York City, Clara Ashford found herself standing in front of her father's expansive office, a place that was both familiar and alien. The walls were adorned with accolades and photographs that captured Victor Ashford's meteoric rise in the healthcare industry, a world dominated by ambition and cutthroat competition. Yet, as she gazed at the polished surfaces and the glimmering awards, Clara felt an unsettling heaviness in her chest. Her father, the man who had built an empire, was now crumbling under the weight of his own success. "Dad?" Clara called softly, pushing the door open. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with the faint aroma of fresh coffee hung in the air. She stepped inside, her heart racing as she saw Victor hunched over his desk, his face contorted in pain. "Are you okay?" Victor looked up, a forced smile plastered on his face that did little to disguise the pallor of his skin. "Of course, sweetheart. Just a little tired, that's all," he replied, but Clara could see through the facade. The sharp lines of his jaw tightened as he shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, you don't look well. Is it your health again?" Clara pressed, her voice tinged with concern. She had noticed the signs, the way he winced when he moved, the fatigue that clung to him like a shadow. Victor sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as he leaned back in his chair. "It's nothing I can't handle. You know how it is, the stress of running a business like this takes its toll. But I'm fine." "Fine?" Clara echoed, crossing her arms. "You've had those headaches for weeks now." "And you Clara," he interrupted, his tone sharper than intended. "I appreciate your concern, but I assure you, I'm managing. I don't need you to worry about me." "Managing? Or ignoring?" she countered, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "You can't keep pretending everything is okay. It's not. You need to see a doctor I said I'm fine." Victor snapped, his patience fraying. The silence that followed was thick, filled with unspoken words and a history of unresolved conflicts. Clara's heart sank. She had witnessed her father's pride overshadowing his need for help countless times before, but this felt different. As the tension hung in the air, Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Dad, I just want you to be healthy. I don't want to lose you," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Victor's expression softened for a fleeting moment, but the walls he had built around himself quickly reasserted their dominance. "I'm not going anywhere, Clara. You have to trust me on this." But she couldn't shake off the gnawing worry. As she turned to leave, her mind raced with thoughts of what lay beneath the surface of her father's bravado. There was a darkness there that she couldn't quite understand, a burden he carried alone. Determined to uncover the truth, Clara began researching her family history in her spare time. What she discovered was a narrative laced with betrayal and abandonment. Through her findings, she learned about Ethan, her father's estranged twin brother, an existence that had been wiped away from Victor's life as if he had never mattered. Days passed, and Clara's resolve only grew stronger. She had to address this fracture, not just for herself but for her father. She needed to confront him with the truth. One quiet evening, she approached her father again, this time finding him seated on the couch, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring blankly at the television. "Dad, can we talk?" Clara asked, sitting down beside him. Victor glanced at her, his brow furrowing. "About what, Clara?" "More about my health. Because I really don't want to do this right now." "No, it's not just about that." Clara hesitated, her heart racing. "It's about Ethan." Victor's expression hardened instantly, his grip on the glass tightening. "I don't want to discuss him. He's not relevant to my life anymore." "But he is, Dad." "He's your brother," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. You just abandoned him. You can't pretend that didn't happen. Don't you see that this is tearing our family apart? Why do you care so much about someone who chose to be a failure? Victor snapped, the anger in his voice echoing through the room. Ethan made his choices. I made mine. Choices that hurt both of you. You're sick, and he could help you. Clara shot back, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. You need a kidney, and you're too proud to even consider reaching out to him. Do you really think I would ask that man for anything? Victor spat, his words tinged with bitterness. He's not worthy of my time or my help. Dad, please, Clara pleaded. You're not just putting your health at risk, you're putting our family at risk. Can't you see that healing begins with forgiveness? You're going to die if you don't swallow your pride. Victor's face paled at the word die, and for a moment, he looked genuinely shaken. Clara, he began, but his voice wavered as he struggled for composure. You don't understand what you're asking. Then help me understand, Dad. Clara urged, her urgency palpable. What happened between you two? Why did you cut him off? You need to face this before it's too late. Victor stared at her, the storm of emotions raging behind his eyes. It's complicated, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan. He was always the sensitive one. I thought I was protecting him by leaving. By leaving? You abandoned him. Clara exclaimed, her heart aching for the brother she had never known. You didn't give him a chance to grow. You didn't even try. Victor's expression shifted, a flicker of regret crossing his face. I thought I was doing what was best for us both. I wanted to succeed, to make something of myself. I couldn't let him hold me back. Hold you back? You were twins. You could have supported each other. Clara felt the weight of her father's choices pressing down on her, a burden she had never asked to bear. You need to find him, Dad. You need to reach out before it's too late. Victor turned away, unable to meet her gaze, and Clara's heart sank further. She had hoped for a breakthrough, a moment of clarity, but all she found was resistance. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan Ashford was lost in his own world. He worked tirelessly at the small community hospital where he had dedicated his life to serving those whom the system often overlooked. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he moved from patient to patient, his compassionate nature evident in every interaction. Dr. Ashford, called a nurse, breaking his focus. You have a moment? Ethan turned, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. Of course, what's up? There's been a call from the administration. They're cutting back on resources again, and they want you to implement a new plan to justify the budget cuts. Ethan's heart sank. Not again. They can't keep doing this. This hospital is the only lifeline for so many people. It's out of our hands, the nurse replied, her eyes filled with sympathy. But you know how they are. They want results, and they want them now. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. I can't just sit back and watch them ruin lives. We need to fight this. Ethan, you know it's not that simple. She hesitated, then added, you've worked so hard. Maybe it's time to consider other options. He shook his head. I can't abandon these patients. They deserve better. As he walked through the corridors, Ethan's mind drifted to memories of his childhood, the laughter, the fights with Victor, the day he lost his brother to ambition. The ache of betrayal lingered, festering like an open wound. Ethan. A voice suddenly broke through his reverie. It was Marcus, an old college friend. What's up, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just the usual, Ethan replied, forcing a smile. You know how it is trying to keep the hospital afloat. Yeah, well, you're one of the good ones, Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder. But you can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You need to take care of you, too. Ethan chuckled dryly. Taking care of me? When was the last time I even thought about that? Maybe it's time you should. Look, I know things are tough between you and Victor, but have you considered reaching out? Reach out? Ethan scoffed, shaking his head. He made his choices. I'm not going to chase after someone who abandoned me. But life's too short for grudges, Marcus insisted. You never know what could happen. Maybe he needs you now more than ever. Ethan's heart clenched at the thought. Could he really forgive the brother who had turned his back on him? It's complicated, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Look, just think about it, okay? You never know what the future holds, Marcus said before Victor Ashford sat in his expansive office, the sunlight cascading through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the polished mahogany desk cluttered with reports, awards, and accolades. He had built an empire in the health sector, a fortune that many envied, but now, as he pressed a hand to his side, a sharp pain bloomed like a flower of agony. He grimaced, leaning back in his leather chair, the weight of solitude pressing down on him more heavily than ever. The grand skyline of New York, vibrant and alive, felt distant and unattainable, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within him. As he tried to focus on the tasks at hand, the pain throbbed insistently, pulling him deeper into a well of reflection. What have I done? He murmured to himself, his eyes drifting to a photo on his desk, a family portrait from years ago, a snapshot of a life that seemed so far removed from the man he had become. The distance he had created between himself and his brother Ethan was palpable, a chasm that he had never bothered to bridge. Just then, the door swung open, and Clara, his daughter, stepped inside, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Dad," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "How are you feeling?" Victor forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine, Clara. Just a little tired. You know how busy things get." She didn't buy it. Clara had inherited her father's keen intuition, and she could see through the facade he put up. "You've been saying that for weeks. I can see it in your face. You need to see a doctor, maybe get a checkup." He waved a dismissive hand. "I don't need a doctor. I'm just dash." The sharp pain flared up again, cutting off his words. He clenched his jaw, hoping to ride it out, but Clara wasn't fooled. "Dad, please. You can't keep ignoring this. You owe it to yourself and to me." Victor's heart twisted at her words, the unspoken plea echoing louder than the pain in his side. "Clara, I promise I'm fine. It's just a little discomfort." She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "It's not just discomfort. You need to be honest with me. Is it serious?" He hesitated, the weight of his pride and his fear battling within him. "It might be," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I may need a kidney transplant." Clara's face paled, and a horrified look crossed her features. "A transplant? Dad, that you need to get help. You can't go on like this." Victor's mind raced. He knew what he needed, but admitting it meant confronting the past he had long tried to forget. "I'm working on it, Clara. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" Clara pressed, her voice rising slightly. "You could have a donor. You have options." He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the truth swirling in the air like smoke. He knew exactly who could help him, but the thought of reaching out to Ethan felt like a betrayal of everything he had built. "It's not that simple," he said at last, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "Why not? If it's Ethan, then dash, because I left him behind." Victor exploded suddenly, his voice echoing off the polished walls. "I made my choices, Clara. I can't just waltz back into his life, expecting him to forgive me. Maybe you should try." Clara shot back, her patience wearing thin. "You're going to die if you don't get this sorted out, and you can't keep pretending everything is all right." Victor fell silent, the harsh truth of her words sinking in. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. "I can't," he finally said, his voice cracking. "I can't face him." Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan Ashford stood in a sterile hospital room, a far cry from the luxurious office his brother inhabited. He was in his element, filled with purpose as he tended to his patients, their gratitude warming his heart. But beneath his professional demeanor was a man haunted by the past, by the memories of a childhood marred by abandonment. "Dr. Ashford," a nurse called, breaking him from his thoughts. "You have a call on line 2. He nodded, his mind still partially elsewhere, and picked up the receiver. "Ethan Ashford." "Ethan, it's Karen from the admin office. We're facing a significant shortage of resources for the upcoming surgery schedule. We need your input on how to handle the situation." "Of course," he replied, his voice steady, but inside, a storm brewed. He had dedicated his life to helping others, yet he felt the weight of a system that often seemed to prioritize profit over patient care. As he hung up, his thoughts wandered back to Victor. It had been years since they had last spoken, since the day Ethan had stood alone, a child yearning for his brother's approval, only to be met with silence. The wound still festered, resentment bubbling beneath the surface. "He's probably too busy counting his money to care," he muttered to himself, frustration seeping into his tone. In that moment, a memory flickered in his mind, a flashback to their childhood, when they had been inseparable, partners in mischief. "What happened to us?" he whispered, the question echoing in the empty room. Suddenly, a voice from the past broke through his reverie. It was Dr. Samuel, his mentor, who had always encouraged him to seek healing, not just for others but for himself. "Ethan," he had said once, "the past can't be changed, but how you move forward. That's in your hands." Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of his mentor's words washing over him. Perhaps it was time to confront the past, to find a way to move forward, not just for himself but for the sake of others who suffered in silence, much like he had. Back in his office, Victor's solitude was palpable, his thoughts racing. Clara had pushed him closer to a breaking point, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized that seeking Ethan might be his only option. But how could he face the brother he had abandoned? "Dad." Clara's voice broke through his thoughts again. "You need to talk to Ethan. You can't keep avoiding this." "I don't want to hurt him more, Clara," he replied, his voice heavy with regret. "Then you need to apologize. You need to fix this," she insisted, her determination unwavering. "You can't carry this burden alone." Victor's heart sank. She was right, but the fear of rejection loomed large. "What if he doesn't want to see me?" "Then at least you tried," Clara said, her voice softer now. "You owe it to yourself, Dad. And to him." He looked up at her, the weight of her words pressing against him. "I don't even know where to start." "Start with the truth," Clara urged, her eyes shining with hope. "You can't fix what's broken if you don't acknowledge it." As Victor stared out at the sprawling city below, he felt the burden of his past pressing in on him. "I'll think about it," he murmured, but deep down, he knew he had to confront his brother, to seek forgiveness not just for himself, but for Ethan, too. In the depths of his heart, Victor felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was a chance for redemption, a chance to mend what had been so carelessly broken. But would it be enough? Would Ethan be willing to open his heart again, or had the distance between them grown too vast to cross? With a heavy sigh, Victor sat back in his chair, wrestling with the realization that time was slipping away, and the only way to reclaim his future was to face the past he had long tried to forget. Clara took a deep breath as she stood before the imposing facade of the hospital where Ethan worked. The sprawling building loomed over her, a mixture of modern glass and steel that seemed to reflect the weight of her mission. She felt a knot in her stomach, unsure of how Ethan might react to her unexpected visit. After all, he had been a ghost in her father's life for so long, a shadow buried beneath the accolades and successes that Victor Ashford had amassed. Yet, Clara knew she had to try. Her father's health was deteriorating, and the only person who could save him was the brother he had left behind. As she stepped through the sliding doors, the bustling atmosphere of the hospital surrounded her. Nurses hurried past, their scrubs a blur of color, while doctors engaged in serious conversations about patient care. Clara felt a pang of anxiety as she navigated through the corridors, the scent of antiseptic hanging in the air. She glanced at the name tags of the staff, hoping to catch a glimpse of Ethan's familiar face, but he was nowhere to be seen. After a few moments of searching, she found the nurse's station and approached a friendly-looking nurse named Linda. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Ethan Ashford. Is he around?" Linda smiled warmly, her eyes brightening at the mention of Ethan's name. "He's in the pediatric ward right now. Always with the kids, that one. Such a good heart." Clara nodded, her heart swelling with admiration for the brother she had never truly known. "Could you point me in the right direction?" "Sure. Just head down this hallway and take a left at the next corner. You'll find him in room 204, Linda instructed, her tone filled with kindness. "Thank you so much," Clara replied, her voice slightly shaky. She followed Linda's directions, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As she approached the room, she could hear laughter and the faint sounds of a child's voice. Peeking through the glass window, she saw Ethan sitting on the floor, surrounded by a group of children, all of them captivated by the colorful storybook he was reading aloud. His hair was a little tousled, and his blue scrubs hugged his frame in a way that made him look both approachable and dedicated. Clara felt an overwhelming sense of pride wash over her. This was the man who had managed to rise above the shadows of their childhood, the one who had chosen a path of compassion rather than bitterness. With a deep breath, she knocked gently on the doorframe, and Ethan's head snapped up. His expression shifted from joy to confusion as he recognized her. "Clara?" he asked, his voice filled with surprise. He rose to his feet, brushing off his knees. "What are you doing here?" I wanted to talk to you," she stammered, stepping into the room and gesturing for the children to continue with their play. They quickly scattered, leaving Clara and Ethan alone. "It's about my dad." Ethan's expression hardened slightly, a flicker of resentment crossing his features. "I don't want to discuss Victor, Clara. Not now, not ever. Please, just hear me out," Clara pleaded, her heart racing. "I know things have been complicated between you two, but he needs help. He's sick, Ethan. Really sick. And you're the only one who can save him." Ethan crossed his arms defensively, his jaw tightening. "You think I'm just going to drop everything and rush to his side? After everything he did?" Clara took a step closer. "I get." Victor Ashford sat at his sprawling mahogany desk, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow across the luxurious office that bore witness to his triumphs and failures. The walls were adorned with accolades, framed certificates and awards declaring him a pioneer in the healthcare industry. Yet, despite the opulence surrounding him, a sharp, gnawing pain in his side made it impossible for him to focus on the accolades. He winced, pressing a hand to his abdomen, trying to ignore the discomfort that had been creeping in over the past few months. "Why is this happening to me?" he whispered to himself, feeling a sense of helplessness wash over him. The question echoed in the vast emptiness of his mind, where success had overshadowed personal relationships and self-reflection. He had spent decades building an empire, yet now, sitting alone in his office, he felt the weight of his solitude more than ever. Just then, the door swung open, and Clara, his daughter, stepped inside. Her face was etched with concern. "Dad, you look pale." She moved closer, her eyes scanning his face for signs of distress. "What's going on?" Victor forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just a little tired, sweetheart. You know how demanding the business can be." He leaned back in his chair, attempting to project an air of nonchalance, but the pain flared again, sharper this time, causing him to grimace. Clara studied him intently, her brow furrowing. "You've been saying that for weeks. This isn't just tiredness, is it?" She crossed her arms, taking a stand that was both protective and probing. "You're not hiding something from me, are you?" "No, of course not." He waved a dismissive hand, although he knew he was lying. "It's just a little discomfort. I'll be fine." But even as he spoke, he felt the truth lurking beneath the surface, a truth he wasn't ready to confront. "Dad, please." Clara's voice softened, but her eyes remained steely. "You can't keep pretending everything is okay. If something is wrong, you need to tell me. We can figure it out together." Victor sighed, feeling cornered by his daughter's earnestness. "I might need a transplant," he finally admitted, the words hanging heavily in the air. "But it's not something we need to worry about right now." "Not worry about?" Clara's voice rose incredulously. "Dad, you can't be serious. This is your health we're talking about. You need to find a donor, and fast." He avoided her gaze, staring out the grande window that showcased the sprawling skyline of New York City, a city he had molded with his vision. "I'll manage," he said, trying to sound authoritative, but deep down, he feared that he might not. Clara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't have to do this alone. You know that, right? What if Ethan enough?" Victor snapped, the name striking like a lightning bolt through the room. "I don't want to talk about him." The anger in his voice surprised even him, but the memory of his twin brother, Ethan, whom he had left behind, was too painful to face. "Why not?" Clara challenged, her voice steady with conviction. "He's family. He's your brother. You can't just pretend he doesn't exist because you made a mistake. Clara, you don't understand. It's complicated. I can't just reach out to him after all these years." Victor leaned forward, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I don't have the energy for this right now." "Maybe you need to confront it," Clara replied, her tone softening. "It might be your only chance, Dad. What if he's the match you need?" Victor felt a chill run down his spine. The very thought of contacting Ethan, the brother he had abandoned, made his stomach churn. He had built a life, a successful career, but at what cost? The pain in his side was a constant reminder that his choices had consequences, and the thought of relying on Ethan felt like an admission of defeat. As Clara left the office, Victor remained seated, his mind racing. The pain in his side seemed to throb in agreement with the turmoil in his heart. He had spent years justifying his decisions, convincing himself that he had made the right choices for his future. But now, faced with a potential death sentence, he was forced to confront the past he had tried so hard to forget. Later that evening, as he sat alone in his office, Victor opened his laptop and began researching kidney transplants. Each click of the mouse brought him closer to the reality he had been avoiding. There were countless stories of people waiting for a donor, and each one echoed the same desperate plea for life. What struck him the most was the realization that he could be one of those desperate souls. He rubbed his temples, frustration mounting as he sifted through the information. "What am I doing?" he muttered. "I should be stronger than this." But the truth was, he felt weak. The world he had built around him filled with power, prestige, and wealth seemed increasingly hollow in the face of mortality. In the quiet of the office, he heard the soft chime of a new email notification. It was Clara, sending him a series of articles about kidney donation and the importance of family in times of crisis. He felt a rush of warmth at her concern but also a wave of anger at himself for putting her in this position. With a heavy heart, he decided to call his assistant. "Margaret," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside, "I need you to arrange a meeting with Dr. Lewis. I want to discuss my options for a transplant." "Of course, Mr. Ashford. I'll set it up right away," she replied, her tone professional yet concerned. Victor hung up, feeling a mix of relief and dread. He knew that he had to confront the truth, but the thought of facing his brother was still too much to bear. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the city lights twinkling in the distance, and wondered if he was willing to swallow his pride for the sake of his health. Days passed, and Clara's determination only grew stronger. She spent hours poring over family history, digging into the past that Victor had buried. One evening, after a long day at work, Clara approached her father with a folder filled with documents. "Dad, I found something," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. "You need to see this." Victor glanced at the folder, his heart racing. "What is it?" "I did some digging into Ethan's life since you left," Clara explained. "He's been working in a hospital, helping people every day. He's turned his life around, Dad. He's not the failure you think he is." Victor's expression hardened. "I don't want to hear it, Clara. That was a long time ago." "But it matters, Dad," she insisted, frustration boiling over. "You can't keep pretending like none of this affects you. You're in desperate need of help, and Ethan could be the answer." He felt a pang of guilt at her words, knowing she was right. But the notion of reaching out to Ethan was fraught with the pain of their past. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just talk to him," Clara urged. "You have to let go of your pride. It's time to make amends." Victor looked away, the weight of his decision settling heavily on his shoulders. "I don't know if I can," he admitted, the vulnerability in his voice palpable. "Then let me help you," Clara said softly. "You don't have to do this alone. We can get through this together." As he stared out the window, Victor felt the weight of his daughter's words pressing down on him. Maybe it was time to confront the ghosts of his past, time to seek forgiveness not just from Ethan, but from himself. He took a deep breath, pondering the possibilities that lay ahead, knowing that the road to healing would require more than just physical strength. It would require courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to face a past that had haunted him for far too long. Ethan sat in his cramped office at the hospital, surrounded by stacks of medical files and the faint scent of antiseptic. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above him, mirroring the constant hum of the hospital outside. His fingers drummed nervously on the desk, betraying the tension that had been building within him since Clara had reached out. She had identified herself as Victor's daughter, and that revelation had sent a jolt through Ethan, a mix of anger and curiosity. "Why would she come to me now?" he thought, biting his lip. "After everything he's done?" He glanced at the clock, its hands moving too slowly for his liking. Tonight was the gala, a high-profile event that Victor Ashford had organized to showcase his latest healthcare initiative. Ethan had no intention of attending. The very thought of seeing Victor again made his stomach churn. The last time they had spoken, Victor had been dismissive, arrogant, and painfully oblivious to the scars he had left on Ethan's life. Just then, his phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from his mentor, Dr. Samuel. "Ethan, you should really consider going to the gala tonight. It could be a good opportunity to network." Ethan scoffed, shaking his head. Network? The last thing he wanted to do was mingle with the very people who had turned a blind eye to the struggles of the less fortunate. But Samuel was persistent. Sometimes, facing the past is the only way to move forward. "Don't let your resentment dictate your life." Ethan sighed, feeling the weight of Samuel's words. The truth was, he was torn. Part of him wanted to confront Victor, to tell him exactly how much his abandonment had hurt. But another part of him was terrified that he would crumble under the pressure, his anger dissipating into nothingness, leaving only the hollow ache of his past. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, running a hand through his hair. With a reluctant resolve, he grabbed his coat and made his way out of the hospital. As he stepped into the bustling streets of New York, the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the city. It felt surreal, the world alive and vibrant while he was wrestling with his inner turmoil. He hailed a cab, and as the vehicle navigated through the busy streets, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on the years that had passed since he had last seen Victor. The gala was held in an opulent ballroom, adorned with chandeliers that sparkled like stars. As Ethan entered, he was greeted by the sight of well-dressed guests mingling, laughter echoing off the walls. He felt out of place, like a ghost haunting a world he no longer belonged to. Ethan's eyes scanned the room, searching for Victor. He spotted him across the crowd, effortlessly charming a group of influential donors. The sight of his brother sent a surge of anger coursing through him. Victor looked so polished, so confident, while Ethan felt like a shadow and afterthought in Victor's grand narrative. "Just breathe," Ethan whispered to himself, taking a moment to steady his racing heart. He moved deeper into the crowd, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Suddenly, he bumped into Clara, who was standing near the entrance, her expression a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Ethan," she said, her eyes widening. "I'm glad you came." "Clara," he replied, forcing a polite smile. "What are you doing here?" "I was hoping to speak with you about my father," she said, her voice earnest. "He needs help, and I think you're the only one who can reach him." Ethan's jaw tightened at the mention of Victor. "Help? Is that what you call it?" "He turned his back on me, Clara. He left me to fend for myself." "I know," she said, her eyes pleading. "But this isn't just about the past. It's about the future. He's sick, Ethan. He might need a kidney transplant." The words hit Ethan like a slap. "Are you serious? You think I'd just waltz in there and offer him my kidney after everything?" "I know it's complicated," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. "But he's still your brother. And despite everything, he's still my father." Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. A father who abandoned me. A father who thought his success was more important than his own flesh and blood. "Victor made mistakes," Clara said, her tone growing more urgent. "But he's human, Ethan. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption." "Redemption?" Ethan scoffed, folding his arms. "What does that even mean to someone like him? He's built an empire on the backs of people like us." Clara looked down, her expression softening. "I don't expect you to forgive him right away. But think about it. If you don't try to reach out, you might regret it." As much as he wanted to argue, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Clara was right. The thought of Victor's life hanging in the balance gnawed at him. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can," Clara encouraged, a hint of determination in her eyes. "You have the power to choose how this story ends. You can either continue to let the past control you or take a step towards healing." Ethan sighed deeply, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. "And what if I can't? What if I just can't forgive him?" "Then at least you'll have tried," Clara said, her voice firm. "You owe it to yourself to confront him. You owe it to both of you." He looked away, his heart racing as the realization sunk in. The gala was more than just an event, it was a battleground for the ghosts of his past. "Okay," he finally said, his voice steadying. "I'll talk to him." Clara's face broke into a smile, a mixture of relief and pride. "Thank you, Ethan. I know this isn't easy." As she turned to walk away, Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. He had made a decision, but the thought of actually facing Victor sent chills down his spine. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the encounter that awaited him. Navigating through the crowd, Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He could see Victor from a distance, his laughter ringing out like a cruel reminder of the life they could have shared. As he approached, he felt the weight of every moment they had lost together pressing down on him. "Ethan." Victor's voice broke through the noise, and Ethan froze. The moment stretched, the room around them fading into a blur as he locked eyes with his brother. "Victor," he managed to say, his voice steadier than he felt. Victor's expression shifted from surprise to uncertainty. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," Ethan replied, his heart racing. "We need to talk about everything." Victor hesitated, a flicker of something fear, perhaps crossing his face. "Here. Now." Yes. I know this isn't the best place, but we can't keep avoiding this. Victor opened his mouth to respond, but instead, he simply nodded, leading Ethan to a quieter corner of the ballroom. The laughter and music faded into the background as they stood facing each other. Ethan felt the tension crackle between them, the years of silence and resentment hanging heavy in the air. "You look good," Victor said awkwardly, his eyes darting away. "Thanks," Ethan replied, his tone flat. "But that's not why I'm here." "Then why?" Victor asked, crossing his arms defensively. "I came to confront you," Ethan said, the words spilling out before he could second-guess himself. "You abandoned me, Victor. You chose your career over your family, and I've been paying for it ever since." Victor's face hardened, a familiar arrogance creeping back in. "I did what I had to do to succeed. You don't understand the pressure I was under." Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "Pressure? You think that justifies leaving me behind?" "I was a kid, Victor. I needed you. I was trying to build a future for our family." Victor shot back, his voice rising. "You think it was easy for me? You think I wanted to leave you? You didn't just leave, you chose to forget," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "You chose to act like I didn't exist." Silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. Victor's gaze softened slightly, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw a flicker of regret. But before he could hold on to that hope, Victor's mask of indifference returned. "You don't know what it was like for me," Victor said, his tone defensive. "You were the one who couldn't keep up. I had to move on for both of us." "Move on? Is that what you call it?" Ethan's voice was barely a whisper now, filled with pain. "You left me to fend for myself in a world that didn't care. And now, you want my help." Victor looked away, his expression conflicted. I didn't think you'd want to see me again." Ethan took a step closer, his heart pounding. "You're right. I didn't want to see you. But Clara told me you're sick. You might need a kidney." Victor's eyes widened, the facade of confidence momentarily slipping. He hesitated. The atmosphere in the elegantly decorated gala was electric, filled with the low hum of conversations and the clinking of glasses. Victor Ashford stood near a grand window, surveying the bustling crowd of influential figures and friends, all gathered to celebrate his latest philanthropic endeavor. His tailored suit clung to him perfectly, exuding confidence, but beneath the polished exterior lay a storm of pain that only he could feel. With every pulse of discomfort radiating from his side, he tried to push it aside, to blend into the facade of strength he had meticulously crafted over the years. Across the room, Clara watched her father with a mix of admiration and concern. The weight of the evening's grandeur felt heavy on her shoulders as she noticed the forced smiles and hollow laughter surrounding him. It was a world built on superficial connections, and she felt a deep ache for the man behind the mask. As she scanned the room, her eyes fell on Ethan, standing at the entrance, his presence a stark contrast to the glitz and glamour. Ethan hesitated at the threshold, a mix of resentment and hope swirling within him. The sight of Victor amidst his elite circle made his blood boil. Memories of childhood, tainted by abandonment, flooded his mind, but beneath the anger lay a flicker of longing, a desire to confront the brother who had cast him aside. As he stepped inside, the murmurs and laughter faded into a dull roar, his focus narrowing to the man he had once idolized. Clara approached Ethan, her heart racing. "You came," she said, relief washing over her. "I almost didn't," Ethan replied, his voice low and laced with tension. "But I couldn't let this opportunity slip away." "You have to talk to him," Clara urged, her eyes darting toward Victor. "It's now or never." Ethan's gaze hardened. What could we possibly say to each other? He has everything, and I'm just a reminder of what he left behind. "But he's sick, Ethan," Clara pressed. "He needs you now more than ever. You can't let pride keep you from healing." With a heavy sigh, Ethan nodded, knowing deep down that Clara was right. He took a deep breath and steeled himself for the confrontation. As he made his way through the crowd, he could feel the weight of every judgmental gaze, every whispered conversation that followed him like a shadow. He reached a secluded corner of the venue, where Victor stood, his back facing him, oblivious to the storm brewing in his brother's heart. "Victor," Ethan said, his voice firm yet trembling. Victor turned slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to guarded recognition. "Ethan. I didn't expect to see you here." "Clearly." Ethan crossed his arms, a defensive barrier against the emotions threatening to spill over. "How are you?" "Still playing the part of the perfect philanthropist." Victor's brow furrowed. "This isn't about me, Ethan. It's about Dash, it's always been about you." Ethan interrupted, the words spilling out like venom. "You left without a second thought, and now you expect me to just waltz in and pretend everything is fine?" Victor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "I didn't abandon you, Ethan. I thought I was doing what was best for both of us." "You were struggling, Dash, struggling." Ethan scoffed, his voice rising. "You call it struggling? I call it survival. You left me to fend for myself, and now you're here, pretending to care because you need something from me." Victor took a step closer, his voice lowering, tinged with desperation. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was trying to make a life, Dash, a life." "You mean your life," Ethan shot back, his anger boiling over. "You became the king of healthcare while I was left to pick up the pieces of our shattered family. You don't get to justify your choices now." The tension hung thick in the air, a palpable barrier that seemed unbreakable. Victor's expression shifted again, this time revealing a hint of vulnerability. "I didn't know what to do, Ethan. I thought I was protecting you from my world, Dash, protecting me." Ethan laughed bitterly. "You were protecting yourself. You were ashamed of me, ashamed of the life you left behind. And now, what? You want me to be your savior?" Victor opened his mouth to respond but hesitated, the weight of Ethan's words settling heavily on his shoulders. "I'm not ashamed of you." "I Dash, then why didn't you come back?" Ethan pressed, his voice breaking slightly. "Why didn't you check on me? You made your choice, Victor. You chose success over family." A flicker of regret crossed Victor's face, and for a moment, silence enveloped them. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence filled with unspoken words and shared pain. Finally, Victor sighed, his facade beginning to crumble. "I thought I could fix it all. I thought if I became successful, I could provide for you from a distance." Ethan shook his head, his heart pounding in his chest. "You have no idea what it was like for me. I worked twice as hard to prove that I was worth something, while you lived in your ivory tower, completely unaware of my struggles." Victor's voice trembled as he replied, "I know I made mistakes. I'm not proud of them. But I need you to understand that I didn't want to lose you." "You lost me the moment you walked away," Ethan said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "And now, you're standing here, pretending that everything is fine, but it's not. You're sick, and you think I'm just going to step in and save you. That's not what I expect." Victor's voice rose, a mixture of frustration and desperation. "I want to make things right, Ethan. I want to fix this." "You can't just fix it with money or influence," Ethan replied sharply. "You think you can offer me something and I'll forget the years of hurt and rejection? You can't buy my forgiveness." Victor's expression softened, and for the first time, vulnerability washed over his features. "I don't want to buy your forgiveness. I want to earn it. I want to understand. Please, just talk to me." Ethan took a step back, his heart racing. "Talk? You think talking will change anything? You've been saying all the right things, but where were you when I needed you?" Victor's shoulders sagged, and he ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I can't change the past, Ethan. I can only try to make amends now." But I need you to give me that chance. The intensity in Ethan's eyes flickered for a moment, revealing a hint of the brotherly bond he once cherished. But it was quickly overshadowed by the walls he had built around himself. You think it's that easy? Just to forget everything and start over? You have no idea what it's like to live in the shadow of your choices. Victor stepped closer, his voice earnest. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to remember together. To heal together. Ethan shook his head, the pain etched on his face. You don't understand. You have everything, and I'm still trying to find my way out of this mess you left behind. The brothers stood there in silence, the weight of their past pressing down on them. Clara watched from a distance, her heart aching for both men. She could see the flicker of hope in Victor's eyes, the desperate need for reconciliation, but she also felt the chasm of resentment that Ethan struggled to bridge. As the party continued around them, the brothers faced each other, two sides of a fractured coin. In that moment it was clear that the road ahead would be anything but easy. But beneath the anger and hurt, there remained a glimmer of something they both desperately needed: a chance at redemption, a chance to heal together. But for now, the past loomed large, and the path to forgiveness was shrouded in uncertainty. Ethan stood in the dimly lit corner of the gala, the lavish decorations around him feeling like a cruel joke. As he gathered his thoughts, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses faded into a dull hum. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within him. He felt the weight of resentment and hurt pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. There he was, surrounded by opulence, yet trapped in a prison of his own making, shackled by years of abandonment and pain. Victor approached, his demeanor polished and confident, a stark contrast to the turmoil Ethan felt. The two men locked eyes, and for a moment, the bustling gala faded into oblivion. Victor, for all his successes, was visibly shaken. The pain in his eyes betrayed his bravado, and Ethan wondered if his brother could see the festering wounds that lay just below the surface of his carefully constructed facade. Ethan, Victor began, his voice steady, but Ethan could hear the tremor beneath it. We need to talk. Do we? Ethan shot back, the bitterness lacing his words sharper than he intended. Is there really anything left to say, Victor? You made your choice a long time ago. Victor's face tightened, the guilt flickering across his features like a candle in the wind. I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes. But you what? Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. You left me. You walked away when I needed you the most. You don't get to play the remorseful brother now, not after all this time. Victor's jaw clenched, and he took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. I was scared, Ethan. I thought I could make a better life for both of us by separating from the past. I thought ambition would fill the void. And look where that got you, Ethan snapped, gesturing to the opulence surrounding them. You've built a castle on the backs of the people you left behind. You think you can just waltz back in and make it all right? The silence between them was thick, punctuated only by the distant chatter of guests enjoying the event. Victor's gaze dropped, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan saw a flicker of vulnerability in his brother's eyes, one that mirrored his own pain. You have to understand, Victor said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to handle it. I thought getting away from you, from the memories, it was for the best. But I was wrong. I lost sight of what truly mattered. Ethan's heart raced at Victor's admission. It felt like a long overdue confession, but the anger still bubbled beneath the surface. You lost sight of me, Victor. You chose success over family. You chose to forget I existed. Do you have any idea how that felt? Victor stepped closer, desperation etched across his features. I do now. I see that I was wrong. I thought I could build a better life for us both, but in reality, I only built a wall between us. I need your help, Ethan. I need you to understand. His words hung in the air, the weight of them almost suffocating. Ethan's chest constricted as he wrestled with his emotions. For years, he had harbored this bitterness, and now Victor was asking him to forgive, to understand, but the scars were deep. "You want my help? After everything?" Ethan's voice trembled, a mix of anger and pain. "You think I can just forget the years of feeling abandoned? Of not knowing if I was worth saving?" Victor flinched at the raw anguish in Ethan's words. "I know I can't change the past. I can't erase the pain I caused you, but I can try to do better. I want to make things right. I want to help you, to help others like us who have suffered because of a broken system." Ethan hesitated, his heart warring with his mind. Part of him wanted to scream, to push Victor away and tell him to go back to his gilded life, but another part, a small, flickering part, longed for reconciliation. "You think a few nice words can fix everything? You think I'm just going to forgive you because you're scared of dying?" Victor's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "No, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want to change. I want to use what I have to fight for something greater than myself, for people who can't afford the care they need." Ethan's breath hitched at the sincerity in Victor's voice. He had always known his brother to be ambitious, relentless in his pursuits, but now, as Victor stood before him, stripped of his bravado, he saw a man desperate to connect, to repair what had been broken. "You want to help?" Ethan asked, his voice softer now, tinged with disbelief. "You think you can just walk back into my life and swoop in to save the day?" "I want to work with you," Victor replied, his voice trembling with emotion. "I want to use my resources to help create a healthcare system that doesn't leave people behind. I want to make sure no one else feels the way we do." Ethan felt the weight of Victor's words settle heavily in the air between them. He searched his brother's face, looking for any sign of insincerity, any hint that this was just another ploy. But all he found was a raw, aching honesty that mirrored his own longing for connection. "You've always been about power and success," Ethan said slowly. "What makes you think you can change now?" "Because I'm scared, Ethan. Scared of losing everything, including you. I've spent my life building a facade, and now it's crumbling. I realize that true success isn't measured by wealth or accolades, but by the impact we have on others." Victor paused, his gaze piercing through the noise of the gala. "I want to make a difference. I want to make things right with you." The ache in Ethan's heart softened slightly at his brother's vulnerability. "What if I can't forgive you? What if I'm not ready to just jump back into being your brother?" Victor lowered his head, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his admission. "I won't force you. I need you to know that I'm here. I'll be here, no matter what. If you can't forgive me today, I'll wait. I'll fight for your trust, for your respect, because that's what family does." The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and the echoes of a fractured past. Ethan felt the tears prick at his eyes, a mixture of anger, sadness, and something else, hope. There was a flicker of possibility, a chance to redefine their relationship, to carve out a new path that didn't solely revolve around pain and betrayal. "You've hurt me, Victor," Ethan said softly, almost hesitantly. "But maybe there's a part of me that wants to believe you can change. That we can change." Victor looked up, his eyes shimmering with a mixture of relief and determination. "I'll do whatever it takes, Ethan. I won't let you down again. We can be better, together." Ethan nodded slowly, the weight of their shared history still heavy on his heart. "It's going to take time. A lot of it. But maybe we can start by being honest with each other. About everything." Victor's face broke into a tentative smile, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. "I'd like that. I really would." As they stood there, amidst the chaos of the gala, two brothers began the slow, painful process of healing. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long time, both men felt the possibility of redemption and the promise of a future where family, forgiveness, and love could triumph over the shadows of their past. As the gala reached its peak, the atmosphere in the grand ballroom of the Ashford Health Foundation was electric. Glittering chandeliers cast a warm glow over the elegantly dressed guests, who mingled and laughed, oblivious to the storm brewing in Victor Ashford's life. Clara stood to the side, her heart racing as she glanced between her father and Ethan, who had just arrived. She felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, knowing that the future of their family hung in the balance. Clara approached her father, her voice steady but filled with concern. "Dad, we need to talk. I have an idea that could change everything." Victor, his face tight with anxiety, raised an eyebrow, intrigued but wary. "What do you mean, Clara? Can't you see I'm busy?" He waved off a couple of acquaintances who were trying to engage him in conversation, his mind clearly elsewhere. Clara took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I know you're trying to put on a brave face, but this isn't just about you anymore. It's about Ethan too. We can't keep ignoring the past." She gestured subtly toward Ethan, who was standing alone, scanning the crowd with a mixture of apprehension and determination. Victor's expression darkened. "Do we really have to bring him into this? He made his choices, Clara. I made mine." "Dad, that's exactly the problem." Clara's voice rose slightly, attracting the attention of nearby partygoers. "You can't keep pretending that everything is fine. You need him, and you know it. You're running out of time." Victor's heart raced at her words. Deep down, he understood the gravity of his situation. He was at a crossroads, battling not only his failing health but also the ghosts of his past. "What do you have in mind?" he asked reluctantly, his eyes narrowing as he studied his daughter's determined expression. Clara smiled, sensing his willingness to listen. "What if you used your influence to help Ethan expand his work? Together, you could create a healthcare system that provides support for those who can't afford it." Victor furrowed his brow, contemplating the idea. "You mean to say I should leverage my wealth and connections for a cause that I've neglected for so long? You think Ethan would even want that?" Clara placed a reassuring hand on her father's arm. "It's not just about the money or the influence. It's about healing, Dad. For you, for Ethan, and for the countless people who suffer because of a broken system. This could bring you two together." Victor's mind raced as he considered the implications of such a partnership. He had spent his life building a healthcare empire, yet he had done so at the expense of his family. And what if he refuses? What if he doesn't want anything to do with me? Victor's voice was laced with vulnerability, a side of him that was rarely seen. "He won't refuse if he sees that you're sincere," Clara insisted. "You have to show him that you want to make things right, that you can change." As they spoke, Ethan caught sight of them and approached, his expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with tension. Clara quickly glanced at her father before answering. "We were just talking about some ideas for the future," she said, trying to sound casual. "I think there's a way for you and Dad to work together." Ethan's eyes flashed with skepticism. "Work together? You think after everything, I'd want to partner with him?" His gaze darted to Victor, the weight of years of resentment evident in his expression. Victor took a step forward, the urgency of the situation pressing on him. "Ethan, please. I know I've made mistakes. But I want to change that. I want to help you make healthcare accessible for everyone, not just the privileged." Ethan crossed his arms, his posture defensive. "And why should I believe you? You've spent your whole life accumulating wealth and ignoring those who need it most. What's different now?" "Because I'm running out of time," Victor admitted, his voice low and raw. The admission hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pain. "I need your help. I need a donor, and I don't want to die without reconciling with you." Ethan's expression softened for just a moment, but he quickly masked it with a facade of indifference. "So now you want to play the poor me card," he said bitterly. You think I'm just going to forget everything? You think I'm going to help you because you're in trouble? Clara interjected, her voice firm. Ethan, this isn't just about the past. It's about what we can do moving forward. If you two work together, you can create something that changes lives. You can make a difference. Ethan looked between Clara and Victor, his heart racing with conflicting emotions. And what if I don't want to help him? He challenged, his voice laced with defiance. Victor took a deep breath, summoning all his courage. You have every right to be angry with me, Ethan. I can't change the past, but I want to make amends. I want to take the resources I have and use them to help those in need. You can lead that charge. I'll support you. For a moment, silence enveloped them. The noise of the gala faded into the background as Ethan searched Victor's eyes for sincerity. And why should I trust you? He asked, his voice a whisper now, tinged with vulnerability. Because I'm willing to put my pride aside, Victor replied, his voice trembling slightly. I was wrong to abandon you, and I've realized that I can't continue down this path of selfishness. I want to be a part of your life, Ethan. I need to be. Clara watched, her heart pounding as she witnessed the exchange between her father and uncle. Please, Ethan. This is a chance for both of you to heal. You can create a legacy that you can both be proud of. Ethan's defenses began to crumble as he considered her words. You really mean it, don't you? He asked, looking at Victor, who nodded earnestly. I do, Victor affirmed, his voice steady. I want to help you reach those who are suffering. I want to change the healthcare system for the better, and I want to do it with you. The tension in the air shifted slightly, and Ethan felt the weight of years of resentment pressing against the walls of his heart. I've spent so long being angry, he admitted, finally allowing himself to be vulnerable. I thought I could just cut you out of my life completely. You don't have to do that, Victor replied softly. You can be in my life, and I can be in yours. We can make a difference together. But it starts with forgiveness. Ethan's heart raced as he weighed his options. Forgiveness felt like a double-edged sword, one that could either liberate him or cut him deeper. And if I say yes, how can I be sure you won't just revert to your old ways? He asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. I can't promise it'll be easy, Victor replied, but I can promise that I'll do everything in my power to change. I'll work with you to make our vision a reality. We can create a healthcare system that puts people first, not profits. Clara watched the exchange, her heart swelling with hope. This is the beginning, Dad. You can do this. You both can. Ethan looked at Victor, searching for a flicker of the brother he once knew, the one who had been lost to ambition and pride. If we do this, it has to be real. No more games, no more pretending. I understand, Victor said, his gaze unwavering. I'll do whatever it takes to prove myself to you, Ethan. As the gala continued around them, the two brothers stood on the precipice of a new beginning, their fates intertwined in a way they had never imagined. Clara felt a sense of relief wash over her as she witnessed the fragile threads of reconciliation begin to weave their lives together once more. Okay, Ethan said finally, his voice steady. Let's do this. But we do it on my terms. Victor nodded, a mixture of gratitude and hope flooding his heart. Whatever it takes, Ethan. I'm all in. And in that moment, amid the glitz and glamour of the gala, something profound shifted. The brothers stood together, ready to face the challenges ahead, ready to create a legacy that would not only heal their fractured relationship but also change lives for the better. The dim light of the gala enveloped the luxurious hall, casting shadows on the faces of the wealthy elite who mingled, laughed, and raised their glasses in toasts. Victor Ashford stood apart from the crowd, a glass of expensive whiskey in hand, his eyes scanning the room. The accolades surrounding him felt heavy, suffocating, and for the first time, the brilliance of his achievements seemed to dull in the face of impending doom. Ethan stood at the edge of the gala, his heart racing. The lavish decorations and the sound of laughter felt foreign to him, a stark contrast to the world he inhabited daily. He adjusted his tie, glancing at Clara, who was engaged in conversation near the bar. She caught his eye and offered an encouraging nod, a silent reminder of the purpose behind his presence. As he moved deeper into the gala, Ethan felt a mix of anger and trepidation. He hadn't seen Victor in years, not since that fateful day when he had walked out of their lives. The pain of abandonment still festered within him, fueling his resentment, but beneath it all lay a flicker of hope, a desire for closure, for understanding. Victor spotted Ethan as he entered the grand hall, and a wave of emotions washed over him. He hadn't anticipated seeing his brother here, and yet, there he was, a living reminder of the choices he had made. Victor's heart raced as he approached, the weight of their shared history pressing down on him like a leaden blanket. "Ethan," Victor started, his voice barely above a whisper, laden with both vulnerability and authority. "I didn't expect you to come." Ethan crossed his arms, a defensive posture, his eyes narrowed. "I didn't come for you, Victor. I came for Clara." Victor swallowed hard, feeling the sting of his brother's words. "I see. You're still angry." Ethan scoffed softly, shaking his head. "Angry doesn't even begin to cover it. You left me, Victor. You chose your empire over family. You chose to pretend I didn't exist." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the distant clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversations. Victor searched for words, but they eluded him, tangled in a web of pride and regret. "Ethan, he started, but Ethan cut him off. "You don't get to explain yourself. Not now. Not after everything." His voice trembled, filled with years of suppressed hurt. "You don't get to come back into my life and act like nothing ever happened." "Believe me, I've thought about it every day," Victor confessed, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I regret how things turned out. I regret that I pushed you away." Ethan stepped closer, his expression a mixture of anger and sorrow. "Regret doesn't change the past, Victor. You made your choices. You've built this empire on the backs of people like me, people who needed help but were cast aside. Do you know how that feels?" "I didn't know," Victor replied, his voice growing strained. "I was consumed by my ambition. I wanted to create something that would change the world, but in my pursuit, I lost sight of what truly mattered. I lost you." Ethan's expression softened momentarily, but the anger simmered just below the surface. "And now you're here, at this gala, pretending everything is fine. You're still the same man who walked away from me." Victor met Ethan's gaze, his brown eyes filled with unshed tears. "I'm not the same man. I'm scared, Ethan. I might need a kidney transplant. And you? You're the only match." Ethan's heart raced at the revelation, but he remained guarded. "So now you want to talk about family?" He stepped back, shaking his head. "You rejected me once, Victor. Why should it be different now?" "Because I'm desperate," Victor admitted, his voice cracking. "Because I've realized that all the wealth and success mean nothing if I'm alone. I need you, Ethan. I need my brother." The air thickened with tension as Ethan processed Victor's words. He felt a surge of conflicting emotions, a deep longing for reconciliation warring with the pain of betrayal. "You think just because you're in trouble, I'm going to jump at the chance to help you? That's not how this works." Victor's shoulders slumped in defeat, and he closed his eyes for a moment, as if summoning the courage to speak the words that had eluded him for so long. "You have to understand. I was afraid. Afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of losing my power. I thought I could do it all alone. But now, I see that I was wrong. I was wrong about you and wrong about us." Ethan shook his head, the pain evident in his eyes. "You don't get to rewrite history, Victor. You don't get to erase the scars you left behind. I've built a life without you, and it hasn't been easy. I've learned to heal, to forgive myself for being abandoned. But I don't know if I can forgive you. Victor took a step closer, his voice barely a whisper. What if I told you that I didn't just come here to ask for a kidney? What if I told you that I want to change? I want to use my influence to help people like you, like us. I want to create a healthcare system that is accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. I want to make amends, not just with you, but with everyone I've hurt. Ethan's heart raced, the weight of Victor's words hanging heavy in the air. You think that's enough? You think a few grand gestures will make up for years of neglect and pain? No, Victor replied, his voice steady. But it's a start. I'm willing to fight for this, Ethan. I need you by my side. Not just for the transplant, but to help me build something meaningful. Together. Ethan looked at his brother, searching for any sign of sincerity. The years of resentment and heartache still clouded his judgment, but something deep within him stirred a flicker of hope. You need to understand, Victor. If I agree to this, it won't just be about the transplant. It will be about you committing to change as a person, as a brother. I promise, Victor said earnestly, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. I'm ready to fight for us. I want to make this right. Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling over him. You say that now, but I need to see it. I need to see you actually put in the work. This isn't just about us. It's about the countless others who have been left behind by a system that doesn't care. Victor nodded, understanding the gravity of Ethan's words. I will. I'll show you, I'll show everyone. This isn't just a chance for me to survive, it's a chance for us to finally do something good together, to heal the wounds of our past. As the brothers stood there, the ambient noise of the gala faded into the background, replaced by the sound of their own heartbeats. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low but firm. If I do this, it will be on my terms. I want to see tangible change, Victor. I want to be part of something real, something that honors our shared history. Victor's heart swelled with a mix of relief and determination. You have my word, Ethan. We will do this together. The moment hung in the air, fragile yet powerful, a tentative bridge spanning the chasm that had divided them for so long. Clara, watching from a distance, felt a rush of hope. Perhaps this was the turning point. Perhaps they could finally heal the wounds of their past, not just for themselves, but for countless others who had suffered in silence. As Ethan extended his hand, Victor took it, their grip firm and resolute. In that moment, they forged a pact, not just of blood, but of purpose. A new chapter awaited, one that promised redemption, healing, and the chance to make a difference in a world that desperately needed it.